This episode is brought to you by 10 Yetis Digital. We started using these guys at the beginning of the year and we've had great results. They're an online public relations agency that manage influencer marketing campaigns, social media campaigns, design. They do design, and they cover sort of multiple sectors, brands big and small. Highly recommended. That's 10yetis.co.uk. Welcome to the Tech Leaders Podcast. I've been looking forward to this one for quite some time. I interviewed Bruce Daisley, the ex-VP of Twitter. He's since left Twitter. He's got a very successful solo career. He does a lot of consultancy. He does a lot of public speaking events. He's got a very successful podcast, Eat, Sleep, Work, Repeat, which I thoroughly recommend. He's also got a very successful Sunday Times best-selling book called The Joy of Work, which did some really groundbreaking stuff around workplace culture and the workplace culture conversation, which Bruce is a bit of a thought leader in. And you know what? We could not have picked a better time to get Bruce on with all that's going on right now. We covered some really on-trend areas and some really important points. There's just lots and lots of value in this conversation, which I'm sure you will realise. Without further ado, it's Bruce Daisley. Bruce, thank you for coming on. We took a while to set this one up. You've been super busy recently, so I so appreciate this, especially on your son's 18th birthday. Thank you so much for coming on. Let's just jump straight in, Bruce. And so if you could just maybe, just a brief intro to yourself and maybe a little bit of an overview of your career from your... I noticed actually that you did a history and economics degree and moved into sales, which is something which I can completely I've got in common with you. But if you could talk from that point in education through to the present, you've had an amazing career. Just give us a bit of a summary of that.
Yeah. So I guess most recently I've been vice president for Twitter across Europe, Middle East, and Africa for 8 years. But prior to that, I started my career in radio. And you mentioned the sales thing. There's an interesting thing. Sort of, grew up in a council estate. What you discover is that there's very little preparation. I had no notion of what jobs were available. And for me, aspirationally trying to get out of Birmingham and get to London, where they looked like it just looked like there was a lot of inequity in terms of there were lots of good jobs in London, but very few good jobs in Birmingham. So, it became my objective, right? If I can get to London, then maybe sort of I can achieve something for myself. Sales is often the route of working class people into trying sort of improving themselves. So, I worked at Capital Radio, then worked in various sort of sales/commercial roles at EMEA, which is sort of now called Bauer, but is a magazine and radio company, and then went from there after a while. Working in those environments, I went to work at Google, worked at Google for about 4 years, helping to set up YouTube in the UK. And then after doing that for 4 years, Twitter contacted me saying, that seems to be going well, and invited me to come and work at Twitter. And I spent the last 8 years there.
What have you learned from this career journey?
Look, I think almost everything that I've done has started with the situation where I've got a very short attention span, and as a consequence of that, once you can empathise with people with short attention spans, it makes you reframe what you do. Look, let's give it a specific example. A lot of us, when we're starting to write a presentation, we write down the facts that we want the audience to know. And what it does is it basically it's all about message sent. It's like, so we see the bullet points, we start typing the bullet points we want, because it's sort of didactic. We want to be sort of instructional, telling people. And if you start from the perspective of empathizing that the audience is bored, then you do something very different. It's only the conceit that the audience is interested in what I've got to say that leads us to create things that are so boring, that are so lifeless, that are so sort of inert. If you start from the perspective the audience doesn't give one care in the world about what I'm going to tell them. So first and foremost, I need to entertain them. I need to distract them. I need to inform them. I need to amuse them. You start with all of that and you get a very different presentation. And, I definitely, one of the things I benefit from, because I worked in commercial radio, in local radio, but we used to have radio stations come down and present to us all the time. And so it was probably the best bit of work experience I ever had, because each week, each Tuesday morning, we would have a radio station come down and try to charm us. And what you learned very quickly was that, if you fall into cliches and sort of established tropes, it's really boring. So, a lot of the radio stations from up north used to come down and say, it's not about flat caps and whippets up north. It's like, yeah, we get it. Because, we're selling radio stations in the north. That is not our preconception of up north. And what you realise very quickly is that people who turned up, I remember one guy turned up from a radio station in Bournemouth, and he did a quiz show. He dressed up as like sort of a Bob Monkhouse style quiz host, and he did a quiz show, and immediately it transformed the energy in the room. And so it was probably my best advantage that I worked in an environment which was a lot of products that weren't the most interesting products in the world, but they were trying to attract interest in them by being different. And it was a really interesting lesson. So then, my philosophy when I went on to work on things like YouTube or work on things like Twitter personally, and it's my own perspective, but personally, I think, both of them are 10 out of 10 products. I think YouTube's one of the greatest creations of humanity, and Twitter, informs and entertains, amuses me every day. And so, my feeling was, okay, I've worked on products that are like 2 out of 10. Now I'm working on products that are 10 out of 10. But can we bring the thing that made the best 2 out of 10 products seem interesting, can we bring that to products like Twitter and YouTube? And so, for a long time, I used to go out to conferences and present on YouTube. And my philosophy was, wow, YouTube is the fastest moving entertainment product in history, because it's sort of crowdsourced. It's it's heat seeking. If something good happens, it's self generating. And so my philosophy was, I have to sell this like it's brand new and hot. So my philosophy was, I was at YouTube, I was in this role, I wanted to go out and evangelize YouTube. And so my view was, I'm never going to do the same presentation twice. So that was my thing. So, so if someone went to a conference and I was presenting on a Tuesday at a conference, and coincidentally they were in the audience when I was presenting at a conference on Thursday, it wouldn't be the same presentation. I wanted people to go, wow, and it would always be new stuff. It would always be like, here's what we've learned this week. Here's the patterns of behavior that people are learning. Because my view was, people used to say, wow, I can't believe it. I saw you 2 wees ago. If you're on the conference circuit, you see a lot of things. I saw you 2 weeks ago. It's a completely new presentation. Mm-hmm. And similarly, when I went to Twitter, I said, okay, right. So, we might not be the biggest product in the social consideration, but we want to sell this in a way that feels, tell the story of this in a way that I'm really comfortable using the word sales. I think we're all selling. Everyone is selling. We're all trying to attract interest.
Why has that become a swear word all of a sudden? I don't get it.
I definitely think if you're well educated, or if you come from sort of an upper middle class background, we often get it with. I tell you where you get loads of people who are sort of studying MBAs, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going into business. I was on a call with some MBA students this week, and they were like, what roles could we get into? We want to get into product management. I said, look, I said, I've never seen a big enough cohort of business students who've made a success of running product management. Product management broadly, you've got to be an engineer, a developer, or a designer. And there are exceptions. There definitely are exceptions, but they are such glaring exceptions that I wouldn't necessarily say that doing that. And they're like, okay, well, what other roles can MBA students do? I say, yeah, commercial. And they're like, I don't really want to get into selling. It's like, look, then the stigma's in your head, because the most vital thing in almost any business is the person who brings new business in the door. And whether that's, you're an agency bringing new clients in, you're an architecture firm and you're bringing new contracts in, bringing new business into any organization is the lifeblood of that organization. It's sort of strange that it's this sort of weird pejorative to call someone a salesperson. Anyway, back to when I was at Twitter, my view was, okay, this is like our philosophy about telling this story has got to be a bit like when you're out in the pub with a friend, or you're out with a friend, and a friend says, "Did you see that thing on Twitter yesterday?" And actually, we knew, for example, that the biggest way to drive new users on Twitter was someone else turning to you saying, "Did you see that? Did you see that yesterday? See what they said?" And so we thought, well, that's got to be our philosophy. So our philosophy was, if you saw something new yesterday, there was a team that all they did was brought things that have happened yesterday to slides and made them look beautiful and distributed them to everyone. So people would stand up and go, right now, these sort of big protests going on across the US, but more broadly everywhere. And if you're turning up and you're presenting right now, and you don't have something about that in, but you've got something about, say, the lockdown or coronavirus, it feels dated. It immediately feels dated. It immediately becomes, oh, when was this written? That sense that, you've got something that looked like it was once topical. And our feeling was, no, this has got to feel like it was written in the cab on the way here, but it's got to look like it gleams. It's brand new. It doesn't look like it was sort of, hacked together. It looks like, wow, this is sort of printed on. The metaphor I used to use is it's got to feel like it's printed on better paper. It's got to feel like it just projects this magic to it. And the best thing we use, the objective that always with our team was, your aim is to be the best presentation of the day. Your aim is to be the best meeting of the week. Because, we're not as big as Facebook. We're not as big as, latterly we weren't as big as Instagram. We're not as new as TikTok. But, actually we've got a really good story, but it's our job to tell that story really well.
Absolutely. Bruce, you're a dream to interview, because I could unpack so much of what you just said there. There was 3 things that stood out. Let me just run with this one, okay? The first half of what you said, you were talking a lot about, doing things differently. You were talking about creating innovative content, essentially, weren't you? And, from the people who were pitching to you, stood out in the early days when you were doing radio, right through to you doing a different talk, a different speech every time you went on stage, you know what I mean? Rather than doing a lift and shift every single time. What do you do to keep creative, keep innovative, keep yourself fresh-minded then? And what do you do to sort of stop going into getting stuck in your ways, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm very critical and very self-critical. So, when I first joined Twitter, my boss said to me, we want to run an event. We run an event for 400 people. And I can't tell you, I was 14 weeks into the job, and I ran this event for 400 people with zero help. I had to hire someone to run the cloakroom for me, but I did all the slides. I presented a bit. I ran all the guest list. Anyone who's run events will tell you how demanding that is. And I came off stage and the team were buzzing. I said, yeah. That was 3 out of 10, maybe just about 4 out of 10. And they're like, what? What are you talking about? That was amazing. Like, no. That was 3 out of 10. Like, I'm devastated about it, but it sort of set a line, so I knew that entirely all of that was down on me. All of that was on me. Yeah. And so, but it set a line. And when we get to 7 out of 10, you'll go, yeah, that was 3 out of 10. And they're like, what are you talking about? Anyway, then we did an event. We did some events that were 7 out of 10. We did one event that was 8 out of 10, maybe one that was 8.5 out of 10. And when I said on that one, wow, I'm blown away. That was 8.5 out of 10. They're like, yeah. That other event was 3 out of 10. It's correct. Because unless you're benchmarking it and working on the basis that we all have 3 10 out of 10 moments in our life, these, you've got to be sort of candid about what these things are. But then as a consequence of that, it just, if you look at something like you're a member of the audience rather than the people who wrote it, that thing where we create something and our friend shows us something and you're just like, yeah, it's not that good, but how do I tell them? I think you've got to look at your own work with those eyes. You've got to sort of say, so, if you can sit there going, okay, I want this to be genuinely fresh. And if it can't be fresh, be sure. If it can't be interesting, be quick, because no one will blame you if you do something really sort of fast and zingy. And so often our instinct is to think, Right, well, look, here's the laundry list of things I want to tell this audience. I want to tell them this and this, and we're doing this now. We'll also get that research, get a slide in on that research, actually get another slide in on the other old research, and what you end up doing is you end up telling them nothing at all. And so our philosophy was very much, no words, really very few words on the slide, really words for emphasis. People needed to rehearse and needed to be scripted.
Just before we move on to anything else, this is really fascinating stuff. I think one thing I've always struggled with is sometimes I've underprepared for things like this a lot, but sometimes I'm overprepared as well.
Yeah.
And finding that balance is quite difficult. I find, I'm not, obviously I haven't done as much as you. And
that old thing when you've done a presentation 20 times.
Yeah.
And you're popping on it. It's like, when you've done it 20 times, you sort of know it almost conversationally, and as a consequence of that, you can see you can make live connections. You can make, if not gags, you can make sort of tangential leaps because you're so comfortable with the sort of the territory. It's like your walk to school, right? If you know your walk to school as a kid, then you very easily you can moderate it, you can riff it, you can like twist it. If you don't know a route, then you sort of walk resolutely, right? We turn left there, and it's that sort of familiarity. And so like when I've got big presentations, generally what I do is I record them onto my phone and then listen to them like 2 or 3 times, almost like it becomes sort of ritualized, sort of like memorized in my head. So when I was presenting at maybe sort of the biggest internet conference in the UK a while ago now. And the big thing for me was, right, prepared all these things. I've got it all flowing. Now I want it to feel like this is going to be the first time I did this, but I want it to feel like it's the 20th time I've done it. In the sense that, the audience might say, I'll give you another example of that actually. The engineers at Google used to always produce these presentations, and like they were works of art, they were magical. And these were engineers, these were computer scientists. So I don't mean to be sort of unfairly critical, but they're not in the performing arts of degrees. And they would turn up, and almost without exception, they would all come and give incredible presentations. And so I'd say to them, one of them actually I think runs AI now at Google, a guy called Clay Bavor. And I'd say, Clay, man, how are you getting this presentation so good? He said, our methodology is simple. We present it 12 times. And he said, some of those are, he said, and it drives you crazy because when you're into the third presentation, you feel like you know it. And he said, probably by the 8th, you go to the room where you're going to be presenting it. The 9th, generally you present it with someone else there. But he said, like, you reach a stage where you're really comfortable with it. So then you can throw in those aside. You don't have that anxiety. The other thing that I always do is that I always say to people, I have like a magpie's eye to stuff. So, whether I'm going through my timeline or whether I'm sort of, if I'm sort of looking on YouTube, I'll be looking out all the time for things that I think I can put that into my presentation, and it will enhance my presentation. So YouTube was a dream for that when I worked there. Yeah. But when I worked for Twitter, Twitter was sort of principally on people's phones, and I remember going to YouTube and searching for person on phone, and I found this clip of a guy walking down the street on his phone, and he looks up, and there's it's being filmed from a helicopter. He's walking down his street, he looks up, and there's a bear in front of him. And it's live on American cable news, and you'll find this man bear phone. You'll find that on YouTube, and he's walking down the street, and he sort of does this sort of almost Wile E. Coyote sort of double take. He sees this bear and then runs off. I'm like, right, boom, okay. So then I sort of clipped that down to like a 30-second thing, and easy to get that into a presentation about mobile, easy to get that into. And so immediately what happens is, right, you're like, okay, what I need to do then, I need to open with something, then I'm going to show that clip, then I'm going to, and what you immediately know is right, I've got a big laugh at the start of this presentation. And what that does, so number one, I haven't been funny. Let's be really clear. I haven't been funny. I've shown something that was funny.
Yeah. And then it gets you more engagement than anything.
Right. boom.
Got their attention.
But I remember a woman saying to me, she said, how would you build a presentation? A really successful woman who sort of runs an agency. And I said, look, I'll be honest, I start with the gag and I build the presentation around the gag. And she's like, wow, my whole approach would be, I would sort of, write the whole presentation, and then, if there was something amusing, then I would try and sort of shoehorn it in, and maybe it wouldn't work. I said, no, I unashamedly start with a gag. So I find myself, so like the big internet presentation that I told you about before, probably 10 years ago now, it was at the IAB conference. And I remember I'd number one, I requested to speak there. And, you can get yourself onto far more conferences than you think if you show them why you're going to be interesting. And once you've got one presentation at a conference somewhere that was interesting, you can send that to the others going, look, here's what I do. I never do the same thing twice. It'll be entertaining. But at that internet conference, I knew about 4 months before that I was speaking. So everything then became, look for clever uses of video. So I found like someone who turned IKEA instructions into a video. And they'd made it, so like he was pitching it to IKEA. Why don't you, for each video, why don't you have a product video? And one of the things was, and so like it was this video done in a sort of hammy Swedish voice with two, bearded Swedish model and a female Swedish model. And it was like, and it was a great, so I showed that, and immediately, by showing 3 or 4 things that people haven't seen, people go, it showed a really powerful video about the care service. And immediately, I'm now just curating this presentation. I'm not sort of there giving blah, blah, blah. I'm curating this, and people are going to go, wow, that's like, it was really thoughtful. I cried a bit. I laughed twice. There was like 3 interesting points. That's it. If you leave people with 1 or 2 or 3 interesting points, you've done the job.
You can't really absorb a great deal more than that. I don't.
Exactly that. And you've left people going.
Listen to you're only going to take 2 or 3 things from it. So, sorry, go on.
Yeah, exactly that. And what's your objective? When you're doing something like that, your objective is to make the product you're associating with look interesting, like they want to find out more about it. When we go out, if you go around to someone's, I don't go to people's houses, if you go around and you meet someone for dinner or you meet someone for food, the person you're interested in is not the person who tells you completely their life story to the extent that you feel like you've got nothing more to learn. It's the person who's like, I'd love to spend more time getting to know them. And yet when it comes to doing presentations, we kind of believe if we leave people with no questions left, somehow we've done a better job. So it's just sort of a strange inversion of that, really.
Yeah, so true. I mean, it's all about engagement, isn't it? It's all about I tell you what's a good platform for this type of content, by the way, if you are looking in the future, you probably already look at it, is Reddit.
Reddit's very good for that.
Yeah, they have really good GIFs and little videos and things that you could use for presentations. I've never done that before, though, so that's brilliant advice.
That's what I would say. Look, number one, feel free to put yourself forward for conferences, and look, and the challenge, of course, is that and I was lucky that I worked on exciting brands, but if people feel like you've got an interesting story to tell, then and you can give them a good summary of what you're going to say. And often the best way to say that is to say, look, I've got brand new research. But look, anyone can do research. If you go to Google consumer surveys, anyone can run a poll. So you can run a poll depending on how targeted it is. So you can say to someone, listen, I'd love to come along to your conference because the week before the conference, I'm running research into people's attitude to this in this. And the research will be brand new. I'm going to be unveiling it there and then. And then basically, it'll cost you, £100 to run a Google consumer survey, maybe more if you target. And so immediately you've got a hook. Then you say to them, look, and I'm always, I always show entertaining stuff. Here's one of my most recent conferences. And immediately you've got a reason why someone would add you to the agenda. Then your job is to knock it out of the park. So exactly to what you said there, I'd be looking on, I'd do some dedicate yourself a couple of hours of YouTube surfing for just looking for really interesting stuff. Go through TikTok. TikTok can be like really fun and it's brief, but it can sort of, you can find a reason to include something that's fun and silly there. Reddit, exactly that. And then immediately then you've created something that is like, that was the best presentation of the day,
Yeah, because it made you laugh and it triggered an emotional response, which is right. More than most other responses, isn't it? So, okay, let's go back to a couple of things you said. You mentioned about sales having stigma around it. I noticed your initials are BD, and you come from a sales background, and you obviously you talk about presenting on stage and selling an idea to an audience. Why do you think there is this stigma around sales, and why has it become a bit of a swear word, and why do people try to rebrand it as something else when they're constantly selling in everyday life, not let alone in just their job?
Yeah, look, the Association of Sales People is that they're trying to persuade you to do something that's in their interest rather than your interest. So I can understand why we might be wary of salespeople, but I think as a profession, actually there's a real nobility to someone trying to help an idea survive by drawing attention to it in a good way. That's it. It's baked into the system to a large extent, though, isn't it? That disdain for sales.
Yeah, distrust, I think, isn't it? I'm going to be led into doing something I don't want to do. So I suppose it's about having a consultative approach, isn't it? Okay, so in terms of going into sort of workplace culture and stuff, then you obviously had the latter part of your career was all leadership. You were leading large teams. You became fascinated at some point with this concept of creating a culture, a modern culture, which is going to get the best out of your employees and things, which then turned into your first book. Talk us through that journey of how did you pursue that angle? You had multiple other angles you could have pursued, being in such a high level leadership role. Why workplace culture? What was interesting about that?
Yeah, I've always been interested in if you've ever done bar work or restaurant work, or maybe in professional environments. But if you do bar work or restaurant work, you can tell by your second shift whether this is going to be a fun place to work or a bad place to work. You can just tell. And there's a strange thing where there's often either a joy to the place, and you're like, there's a couple of characters there who just imbue the whole place with such great energy that you find yourself asking for more shifts. Someone says to you, "Can you do Tuesday as well?" You're like, yeah, definitely. It's like this, you sort of feel enchanted by the place. Or, there's some places where you're like, oh my God, there's just such a sort of cutthroat energy to this whole place. I'm doing it to earn my coin, but I'm sort of don't want to linger. And, it was the same when I joined professional jobs. There were some places that had a great energy and some that didn't. And I was really interested. My first professional job was at Capital Radio, and it was a part of Capital Radio that was rather chaotic. But our competitors were really differentiated from us, because our competitors were slightly more organised, not necessarily more organised, but they had a quite backstabbing culture to them. And so everyone we'd meet from that organisation would remark on the esprit de corps that we had in our organisation. And so I was really interested in that. And look, what happened was that during the course of time at 8 years at Twitter, so 8 years doing the same job, I guess could feel repetitive, but during my time there, we were doing 2 rebuildings. We were sort of trying to re-energize after some downs and some ups. So it's certainly from my perspective, I'd sort of built this amazing culture, and then what happened was, in about 3 years ago, so 2017, the culture took a turn for the worse, and it was almost certainly partly down to my actions. It was partly down to the situation of the company at the time. And so, having witnessed these great places that I'd worked, I was thinking, okay, well, look, actually this is a test of my own humility, really. What have I done wrong here that I can now set about trying to correct? What have I done wrong here that, maybe I can put the toothpaste back in the tube. Maybe I can sort of try and re-energize the place, bring some mojo back to the place. And so that became my fascination. What could I do there? And look, it was it was sort of really interesting for me. It was intriguing for me because the moment you start studying workplace culture, you realize there's a lot of stuff written about it in academic papers, but not a lot of it reaches people in full-time jobs. So I turned that into a book. Now, look, buyer beware, the book is available in 2 different titles, and that's because the Americans chose to change the title when it was published there. So don't buy both books thinking I'm going to work my way through this and then get to the end of the first, start the second one and go, God, this guy's a bit repetitive. They're the same book. Eat, Sleep, Work, Repeat, Enjoy the Work. Joy of Work is the UK edition.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of practical advice for business leaders, then, and people who are trying to build a culture of innovation, creativity, but also productivity as well. Because I think, from someone who's who's been on this journey, I think the biggest challenge that certainly I've faced working in SME is that a good culture for Jack is not necessarily a good culture for Jill. So you need to come up with a culture that works for everybody. You see what I mean? That's obviously being, and also you want to cultivate innovation and productivity as well. What kind of generic advice would you give to business owners to try and solve that problem?
Yeah, well, the big thing for me is that, the secret of a good workplace culture is probably the 2 components are that you almost observe everywhere are 2 things called psychological safety and positive affect. Psychological safety is about your ability to speak candidly to each other. So, that can apply anywhere. So it can apply in your relationship. It can apply in friendships. It can apply in workplace settings. So, that feeling that quite often, sometimes we can find ourselves walking out of a meeting room, shaking our head going, oh my God, the boss doesn't get it. Sort of someone giving you an order and you're like, everyone who does the day-to-day work's like, that won't work. I mean, when was the last time you tried to do it? And that's an absence of psychological safety. What you discover is the best environments do have the ability for people to say, this won't work. Yeah. How about we try this? And so that psychological safety is immensely hard to get. But one of the stories I loved the most in my book was about actually open heart surgery. So when open heart surgery was most notably innovated, it was about 15 years ago. So prior to that, open heart surgery used to sort of quite graphically involve your rib cage being expanded open. So, very invasive. Your rib cage was opened. They would operate on your heart, almost like, imagine a Sunday lunch and you're sort of halfway there. And then they changed it to open heart surgery, involved a really slight incision on your left-hand side between your ribs, but then the stent was inserted through an artery in your leg. And massive change. Now, what happened was a researcher did some research when teams were implementing it. So it was the innovation was created by a company, and then it was implemented by surgical teams around the world. And what you discovered was that the teams who did best were the ones where the lead surgeon would model uncertainty, would model openness, would model questioning. So after every time they operated, he'd say, okay, right, what didn't work? What did work? What questions have we got? And what you discover very quickly is that the big difference between the 2 methodologies was that the surgeon could see loads in both of them, but the surgical teams couldn't see anything in the new version compared to the old version. And so the best surgeons would hear that and go, right, so would it help if I wore a camera on my head? Right, immediately, the teams that did that made a step forward in terms of everyone felt like they understood what was going on. Next thing, the surgeon would say, okay, how's everyone feeling? Someone says, look, I just don't get any sense of how the patient's doing. Right, so what could we do? And by asking questions and modelling that, you reach a stage. Really interesting is to see the output. So the teams that did this, teams where the surgeon modelled psychological safety, had questions. By the time that it was projected that once you'd done about 12 operations, you would reach capability. These teams that were doing it this way, by the time they reached 5 or 6, they were like, actually, we're pretty good with this. We're rocking this. Let's ask for some more difficult patients where they initially felt that, even the procedure wouldn't work. The teams who didn't do it would reach about 9, 10, 11 operations. They were going so badly, they abandoned it. Really interesting. And so that's it. So the secret of a good team is psychological safety. I won't go massively into the positive affect now, but it's sort of related to positive psychology. Fundamentally, it comes down to the notion of positive psychology there comes down to asking yourself the question, do I believe that the decisions I make are influenced by the mood I'm in? Okay. It's interesting proposition. And then if you don't believe that they are, then ask yourself, was there a good time to go and ask your mum something as a kid? And was there a bad time? Okay. Most of us recognize
everyone.
right. Most of us recognize that whether it's in our adult life or a childhood life, but most of us recognize there was a good time and a bad time. Why? Because mood influences our decision making. And so they're broadly the two, the critical things of workplace culture. And so what you discover, though, is that if you can create an environment where people are comfortable saying, not sure, or how about, or just thinking this, all of that psychological safety, then creativity often results from it. So, the biggest thing to kill creativity is someone knows there's the word no is waiting for them at the end of the sentence. So, if you're looking for someone to come up with no idea is a bad idea, no idea is a bad idea, someone says, how about we went from a paid model to, a one-off paid model to a subscription model. And if the boss says, no, we're not doing that, we're like, immediately people are like, okay, I've worked out what show we're in here, and we're in, pretend to raise questions. And this is the biggest question, the biggest challenge for work for most people, is that if you look at the workplace engagement scores, or the work engagement scores, because we don't have workplaces anymore. But the work engagement scores, they're immensely low, but most people don't feel connected with their job. There's more people who are actively disengaged with their job than there are actively engaged with their job by sort of a factor of 2. So, we're in a zone where a lot of people feel like they've tried something and they got pushed back, and it forces them to be slightly disengaged. And all of that, I became so fascinated with it, because broadly you end up with something where you think, okay, you can actually engineer good workplace culture, almost like you can make a good chili con carne. You follow a series of instructional recipes, you do various things, and you can improve your workplace dynamic.
But it's not really authentic, though, is it? I think if you need to believe it, and you need to get your employees believing in your vision, I think, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. But absolutely, no doubt, in psychological safety, you can't fake psychological safety. So, if you can't pretend that this is sort of going to be a place where no answer is a bad answer, and then all of a sudden people give a bad answer and you fire that guy. So, all these things are immensely difficult, very easy to destroy, very difficult to establish. But there are certain things that can act as your guide. So if you understand these things, I spent some time chatting to a member of the elite services, like sort of Special Air Force, Special Boat Service, and I chat to an elite British combat soldier, and he says, look, here's our method of doing psychological safety. After every day's maneuvers, we have a hot debrief, they call it, where they all stand sort of sweat still evaporating from their clothes. They stand together, and the team of 10, 12 of them stand together, and he will describe what happened on the battlefield today. And then he'll say what he saw happen. Then he'll say what he did wrong himself. Then he'll say what he felt went well. And what it immediately does is it establishes a part of our routine here is a candor and honesty of what we did wrong and what we did well. So that consequently, it's not seen as a personal character trait if you've done something wrong, but more a human act that we all do. But by accessing that honesty, we actually get closer to all being transparent with each other. And you need little maneuvers like that you bake into the way that you work to try and sort of improve these things, really.
Yeah, I think psychological safety is a really interesting subject, and it's something which I did a mini MBA course last year, and we talked about this at length. And it was just essentially empowering your employees to have the courage to voice their opinion and not fear looking stupid and not fear making mistakes. And if you can build that culture that nothing is off limits, no idea is a bad idea, and I think you're onto a winner, aren't you? Because I tell you what, Bruce, right? I listened to your podcast. You got a great podcast, by the way. And there was one episode, Being a Sports Fan, which stood out for me, which was you interviewed the guy who wrote the Barcelona Way.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Damien Hughes.
Damien Hughes, great guy, great guest. There was one story he told about Pep Guardiola, which I thought was really interesting. It was about when he was at Barcelona, when they had this, they won multiple European trophies, this sort of decorated history of winning silverware. And he went in, he took over. He wasn't favoured to get the job, but he got the job anyway. And he just inherited a team of kind of hyperinflated egos, basically. Who were driving to sort of training in Ferraris and stuff. And he kind of bestowed more of a humble culture in there, didn't he? Banned the Ferraris, banned the Rolexes, dress like normal people, act like normal people, and have good values and work hard, instill a working class culture in them, essentially. And it was, they were the best team in the world 3 years later, So, but it was, what the interesting part is when you had a job in between. But then when you went to Man City, he inherited a club which was a bit down on its luck. They'd had a bit of a success in the recent years, but they hadn't really won any trophies for a long time. So he did the actual opposite and didn't lift and shift the culture. He actually tailored a different, he had a different approach tailored to that club, which was to encourage them to buy the Ferraris and the Rolexes and act like champions. Do you know what I mean? Yes, of leadership there, Sorry.
I think there's an interesting thing in that, though. So, like in the course of that podcast, sort of, there's been 100 episodes, and like there's been a vast range of things from, chatting to NHS nurses to chatting to doctors to chatting to combat soldiers, like all manner of things, but and a lot of office stuff. But his thing there, I think, at Barcelona was that he recognising that the culture he created at Barcelona was about Catalan pride, and like you say, it's there's probably a class element to it, but there's also sort of this national pride that exists in Catalonia, and Barcelona was the embodiment of that. When he went to Man City, exactly like you say, there was an innate pride, but also an embarrassment, and so he wanted to bring a degree of flashiness to them. He wanted to bring I don't know if one of the words used was swagger, but he wanted to bring this sort of that swagger that I guess classically might be associated with sort of the big boy clubs. He wanted them to look like they weren't the poor neighbours. So it's just really interesting that I also did an episode. I've only done 2 episodes on sport, maybe 3 episodes on sport. But I also did an episode about Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool, which has probably been the biggest episode ever. Just about like the things that Jurgen Klopp does and how you can learn from those things. And sport can be an uncomfortable metaphor sometimes for business, but they're often, if you act selectively, it can be helpful.
Yeah, I think Premier League manager is kind of leadership at the sharp end, isn't it? The minute it starts to go wrong, you get fired. It's gets brutal and that.
But the difficulty is that these very focused blocks of work, and you can't maintain a Premier. They have sort of 3 months off in the summer. You can't maintain some of the things that happen. They've got a very transparent relationship between actions and results that most business doesn't have. So there's a lot of things where the parallels aren't always helpful. In fact, I go through the challenges of that in the podcasts.
I'll have to check that one out. I haven't listened to that one yet.
Yeah, it's the best one.
Okay, so let's go back to just a couple of things around sort of work culture and specifically internal comms. Okay, I'm really interested in this subject right now. Things have obviously changed enormously in the last 11 weeks, which we're all aware of. You've talked publicly about minimizing meetings. I've read some stuff. You were talking about walking meetings, which I think are great, by the way. 0 email weekends to sort of give your brain a break and all that kind of thing. All stuff I'm completely bought into. But what do you think is going to change as a result of this lockdown situation? Obviously, we know a lot of companies are probably not going to go back to the office. They're going to work completely remotely. I think most companies are potentially going to have more of a balance going forward. How has internal comms changed as a result, in terms of what's going to happen, with more remote working?
Yeah, I mean, look,
changed at all?
I think everything's changed, and I don't think that's hyperbole. Here's what was happening. I was in the middle of when lockdown started. I thought I'm going to use this time productively, and I'm in the middle of writing a book, and then suddenly, when we got into about 7 weeks of lockdown, there was just this penny flipped, and so I'm doing most of it as a weekly newsletter right now. So if anyone is interested in that, maybe we could give the link to eatsleepworkrepeat.com. But I do a newsletter because broadly, like, here's what I'll say has changed. Well, firstly, we're not going back to the office. We're not going back to the office in a number of ways. Number one, a lot of firms are saying that it's evident to them that the amount they're spending on commercial property is actually an expense that they can save money on. So, whether that's Barclays saying that they're not going to have everyone back, Morgan Stanley have said that they don't see the old model that they did is going to work. Nielsen, the research company, said they can believe that people will come in for maybe a day a week for meetings, but the old way of working isn't going to happen. I chatted to people who worked at a local authority who told me that they're already planning to sell a third of their real estate. And so, and because in addition, if you chat to I had a conversation with someone who works in commercial property this week, and they said for the next year and a half, we can only have 30 to 45% occupancy of the offices we've got. So it's not even like, okay, well, I've got a boss and my boss is bringing everyone back. that's not legally going to be possible because of the liability for what goes wrong. So look, we can't return to the world as it was probably till the end of next year anyway. Right. That focuses the mind because, if you're saying the interim for you is going to be the best part of 21 months, then it begs the question, people who are not treating this as an interim situation, but are thinking, let's build something new, different, productive, then they're getting a run on you. And so the question then becomes, how can you engineer work so it feels different? Now, for some of the fundamental things that we haven't yet got around to thinking about, what does recruitment look like when you do things remotely? What does onboarding someone look like when you do things remotely? What does starting your career look like when you do things remotely? Most of us learned the things that we might vaguely consider our knowledge and achievements and our skills. We learned them at the knees of elders. Like you learned them because you were sitting next to a guy who was in the middle of a negotiation. You were you watched the sort of the office genius write her slides, and you sort of watched her thought process. It's all these things are a lay learning process, and the challenge for all of us is going to be, how do you replicate some of that when those norms have been demolished? But most certainly the big challenge for all of us right now is, how do we bridge to new organizations? And the really interesting thing for me is that there are a whole group of organizations that have always been remote only. So the company that runs WordPress, a company called Automatic, but there's also a number of other software firms, a company called Basecamp, a company called Buffer, all completely remote. InVision, they're all completely remote. And what you learn from them is that they recognize that the burden of meetings is far smaller. They work to a way to allow people to work asynchronously rather than synchronously, meaning that your boss isn't pinging you because your light has gone off in Google Chat or in Slack. That your boss recognizes that you'll have a list of things that you're responsible for, and you'll get them done by the end of the week, month or quarter. And so, what's the upside of that is that, maybe if you're a keen cyclist or a sunbathing enthusiast, you might get the opportunity to go and do a couple of hours of those things in the day and flip it. So you start your working day earlier or finish it later, and you can get more yin yang to your life. But fundamentally, I think everything has changed, and the question now becomes how quickly your workplace is going to adapt to that. Really, that's kind of what I'm trying to cover in the newsletter.
Yeah, and I think as leaders, I think one paradigm shift is and it was going, and I spoke to people recently, and I read about a lot of what's going to change during this lockdown was going to change anyway. We're just going to accelerate what was happening anyway. But,
yeah.
It's going to move a lot quicker. But one thing that has changed is that I think more companies are going to have to embrace more outcome-based management.
Absolutely.
And get away from this micromanagement and just say, well, here's your goals, here's what you need to achieve. You've got creative autonomy to achieve that. And if you want to work it sunbathing in your garden, and you want to work strange hours, that's fine. No problem with that. You just do what we need you to do, and I'll leave you alone. It's that type thing. So
absolutely. There's something in my newsletter that's going out this week that's talking about it's by a business professor journalist, and he says the old model of work was managers should be ruthless, nicely, and and our job was to sort of be demanding nicely. And when people are fully remote, the first thing that you might seek to do if you're trying to do that is you might seek to sort of check that they're online all the time. Where are they? Very quickly, over time, the best people are going to say, I can't be bothered with that. The question that's going to be when someone recommends you go and do a job, you'll say to them, how many hours of Zoom calls do you do a week? And if you're doing 30 hours of Zoom calls, sort of staring into your computer screen from your bed, people will go, I don't fancy that. Sounds like a pretty lame culture. So some of these things that we probably hid before, the volume of meetings, now are going to be transparent. It's going to be sort of the thing that people say in Glassdoor reviews. They're going to say, wow, this place was really inspiring. I felt like an agent sort of trying to use my initiative, my guile to get a job done. And other companies will say, I just felt like I was on relentless video calls, and it sort of ended up damaging my mental health. So I think, it will be strongly differentiated within a year.
Let's talk about mental health very quickly then. You've talked about burnout quite a lot in the past. I mean, one thing that stood out to me, I think I mentioned this to you, is you talked about the facade of cuddling dogs on beanbags, which is essentially, companies providing this, this front in terms of, come and work for us and everything is rosy. But there's a lot of people getting overworked and struggling emotionally in the background because, like you said, you've said in the past, and I think in your book, the working day has gone from 7.5 to 9.5 hours a day. It's probably more than that in a lot of cases. People are, working really long hours. Burnout is a very real thing. People don't know. A lot of people don't realize they're burned out when they are. But then productivity, creativity certainly dips and all that type of thing. How is that going to get impacted by all the changes you've just mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first, we're sort of just working our way through trying to understand what's happening to all of us right now. But I think the big thing right now is probably there is a danger that, with a large amount of the workforce furloughed, or the people who are furloughed have obviously got some anxiety about, does this mean that I'm first on the firing line when it comes to like a full-time job? And then maybe the people who are in jobs thinking, okay, I don't want to be the next to be furloughed. So, there's a lot of anxiety, and one of the ways that we've seen that expressed right now is that we've seen it expressed with sort of people feeling like they're working longer, doing more work, and working longer hours. So one of the pieces of evidence I saw was that the people who work in the US, people are working 3 hours longer. So it's like, every day. So it's like bananas, and this will definitely perpetuate what's going on. The challenge, of course, is that it will feel like first world problems because a quarter of the workforce is unemployed right now in the US.
Yeah.
They don't have a furloughing schemes. But, the idea that you're going to be reporting feeling burnt out will feel like a triviality compared to people who are on welfare.
No, absolutely. Okay, then. So I'm mindful of time, Bruce. I know you're a busy chap, and obviously you've got some stuff going on with your son's birthday and so on and so forth. So I wanted to finish on a couple of questions about you in terms of how you've stayed motivated and creative and stayed on top of your sort of work over the last 11 weeks. What are you doing? Have you got a structure you're following? What are you doing to keep on top of things?
Yeah, I mean, I would not say my last 12 weeks would be anything that I would want to go into sort of a productivity workbook. Definitely the first year of lockdown I thought was confusing. The second year of lockdown, I cooked more things in the first year of lockdown. The second year of lockdown, I sort of got into more of a routine, and I would describe myself as firmly in a rut in the third year of lockdown. So I'm now in sort of this zone where, it's very difficult when you reflect back to sort of try and remember what you've done, right? Because every day looks the same. So I'm grateful for my health, let's put it that way.
Absolutely. Have you learned anything, any tools you've discovered, any habits you've picked up over this time?
No, I mean, first month I definitely cooked more recipes than I'm cooking now. I've been researching a book on identity and resilience, and so actually I was really buzzing off that research in the first few weeks. I haven't done as much of it in the last week or so.
Identity and resilience, yeah.
Well, just like basically this sort of when you look into resilience and why some people are more resilient, it's often as much about the story they tell themselves and like their identity and who they represent. So a very sort of simplistic way to point that out to you is that immigrant mentality, identity. Quite often children of immigrant parents are imbued with a strong sense that unless you work hard, you've failed the endeavor that we set about when we brought you to this country. And so what you have often is that people sort of first generation immigrant children can be they're often sort of some of the biggest disruptors, the biggest innovators, the biggest creators. They're often people who come up with new ways of doing things. There seems to be sort of a brilliant combination of an outsider's mentality combined with a powerful work ethic, and a really interesting idea. One of the things I chatted to a brilliant person last week, and she was saying, for children of immigrant parents, the big thing, education is like a vast, really important thing because it's seen as a ticket to transformation. And so I'm just really interested in our ideas of identity because, whether you are another area of identity, whether you're a Brexiteer or a Remain person, it defines your identity. And interestingly, we can learn increasingly from the identity that people have to that question. We can understand their attitudes to questions about ecology. We can understand their attitudes to questions about, the rights of different groups. It's really interesting. It seems to form an identity, and so I'm just looking into the way that intersects with work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think different perspectives is really important, isn't it? And that's why diversity is such an important thing in business. Having a diverse culture is so important, isn't it? What book or story have you been inspired by then, Bruce? Is there any sort of books that have changed your career or changed the way you changed your perspective on anything, or any videos, documentaries, whatever, any pieces of content which you thought were quite poignant in your way of thinking?
I really enjoyed Johan Hari's Lost Connections. Probably if you haven't got the time to read that, then I think he did an 18-minute TED talk. He's done 2 TED talks, one on drugs, which is also brilliant, and one on it's ostensibly on depression, but it's not about depression. It's about I think his point broadly is if we used the phrase disconnected instead of depressed, it would be more instructive for us to understand what that actually represents. And actually, it's really interesting. It's just brilliant. I loved that. I loved Gio Tolentino's Trick Mirror last year, which is sort of a series of essays about the internet and how it affects us. I think that was brilliant.
I've not read Johan Hari. I've not heard of the second one, but I'll check that out. I've not read Johan Hari's book, Lost Connections, but I listened to a podcast with him. He was on Joe Rogan. Yeah. And I think it was brilliant. And knowledge on that subject is incredible. And it's more about perception around depression and things, isn't it?
Very much so. And look, it might put people off the fact it's about depression, because they might either say, they're not personally depressed, but actually it goes way beyond that. It goes beyond sort of depression. One of the biggest killers in society is loneliness, and that people feeling disconnected is a big societal issue, I think.
Of course, no, absolutely. He's done some great stuff on the drugs war in America as well, which is really
fantastic. That was his first TED talk. So good, man.
Yeah. Last question then, Bruce. What advice would you give to business leaders in this difficult period right now who are trying to keep their team engaged, together, productive, creative? What would you say to them?
Yeah, try and focus where the good stuff is. The danger that we all find ourselves in is that when we feel uncertain, when we feel worried, we often try to dial up the control. And, so that can happen everywhere. It can happen. I remember I was at Google when the chief exec changed, and the first thing he did was a series of these actions to try and control what people were doing. It's a naturally to human, it's an innate thing that we try and control things more when we're worried. And what you discover actually is the more that you can empower people, you can give people specific tasks, roles, responsibilities. You discover when you do that, you actually get a better result. It's often scarier, but giving people the problem to solve, it seems to be better than giving them the marching orders.
Fantastic. Bruce, really, really interesting stuff we covered here. I could talk to you all day.
Thank you so much.
Bruce, really good. I really appreciate you coming on the show. All the best.
Stay lucky.